I wish someone had told me the truth before I ever stepped into this league. Not the motivational version, not the highlight reel version, the real one. Because when you grow up playing basketball, you're taught a very simple equation. Work harder than everyone else, compete fearlessly, earn your spot, and everything else will take care of itself. That belief becomes your foundation. It becomes your comfort. You trust it. I trusted it. I thought the WNBA would be the purest version of that idea, the highest level where talent, effort, and toughness mattered more than anything else. And in some ways it does. But what I didn't understand back then is that the league isn't just a place where basketball is played. It's a place where stories are built, expectations are managed, and comfort often matters more than confrontation. No one explains that part to you. There's no meeting where they sit you down and say, here's how things really work. You're expected to learn it on the fly, while competing, while being watched, while being judged. And the hardest part is that at first, nothing feels wrong. You're playing, you're grinding, you're doing your job, but slowly, quietly, you start noticing that the game you prepared for isn't exactly the game you walked into. The reactions feel different. The silence feels louder. The rules feel unwritten. And one day, without a big moment or a dramatic turning point, it hits you. Talent alone doesn't protect you here. Effort alone doesn't explain everything. There's another layer to this league, one nobody talks about openly, and learning that lesson the hard way changes how you see everything that comes after. At the beginning, I didn't question anything. Why would I? I had spent my entire career believing that if you earned respect on the court, everything else followed naturally. You play hard, you compete, you sacrifice, and people meet you where you are. That logic had never failed me before. So when I entered the league, I carried that same mindset with confidence. I showed up ready to work, ready to adapt, ready to prove myself every single night. I thought performance would speak loud enough on its own. I thought consistency would quiet any doubts. And for a while, that belief kept me comfortable. It gave me direction. It gave me something solid to hold on to in a new environment. But what I didn't realize was that at this level, performance is only one voice in a much larger conversation. There are expectations placed on you before you ever step on the floor. There are assumptions about who you are, how you should act, what role you should play, and how much space you're allowed to take up. And those assumptions don't always move with logic or effort. You can feel it when preparation doesn't change perception, when showing up the same way doesn't get the same response. And that's when doubt starts to creep in. Not about your ability, but about the system you're operating inside. You begin to understand that the league doesn't just test how well you play, it tests how well you fit. And that realization quietly challenges everything you thought you knew about earning your place. The first real shift didn't come with a headline or a confrontation. It came in moments that were easy to dismiss if you weren't paying attention. A tone change here, a hesitation there, feedback that felt carefully worded instead of direct. You start noticing how some things are addressed quickly while others are quietly avoided. How certain behaviors are explained away for some players but magnified for others. And at first, you blame yourself. You think maybe you're reading too much into it. Maybe you just need to adjust, be patient, stay focused. But when the same patterns keep repeating, it becomes harder to ignore. You realize that effort doesn't always reset the room the way you expect it to, and that consistency doesn't always lead to clarity. And that's unsettling because clarity is what athletes depend on. When the rules are clear, you adapt. When the expectations are defined, you meet them. But here, the rules feel flexible and the expectations feel unspoken. You begin to sense that there's a version of you that people are more comfortable with, and another version they quietly resist. And once you become aware of that gap, the game changes. You're no longer just competing against opponents. You're navigating perception, timing, and comfort, all while trying to stay true to the player and person you've always been. That's when you start to understand that learning how the WNBA really works isn't about basketball IQ, it's about awareness. That awareness is what makes everything heavier, because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you start recognizing how much of the league operates on comfort rather than confrontation, on maintaining balance rather than challenging it. You notice how honesty is appreciated in theory, but managed carefully in practice. Saying the wrong thing doesn't get you punished openly. It gets you quietly repositioned. You're still there, still playing, still included, but the margins change. Opportunities feel narrower, conversations feel shorter, the room feels more careful around you, and that's the part no one prepares you for. Not the physical grind, not the travel, not the competition, but the emotional intelligence required just to survive without losing yourself. You realize that fitting in doesn't mean changing who you are, but it does mean understanding when your truth makes people uncomfortable. And discomfort at this level is something the system tries to smooth over instead of sitting with. That realization doesn't come with anger, it comes with clarity. A quiet understanding that the league has its own rhythm, its own unspoken rules, and its own way of deciding who gets space and who has to earn it over and over again. And once you recognize that, you're forced to make a choice: keep pushing the way you always have, or learn how to move smarter within a system that was never fully explained to you. And that's when the internal struggle really begins. Not on the court, but in your head, and you start asking yourself questions you never had to ask before. Should I say this or let it go? Should I speak up, or will that just create more distance? You replay conversations long after they're over, wondering how your words landed instead of whether they were true. And that kind of second guessing slowly wears you down. It's not loud, it doesn't explode, it just sits with you. And you're still competing and still training, still pushing your body to the limit, but now you're also carrying the weight of awareness. The awareness that being yourself has consequences, that honesty has a cost, and the most exhausting part is realizing that the cost isn't always clear. Sometimes it's not a benching or a headline. Sometimes it's subtle. Less trust, less openness, fewer chances to reset the narrative, and you can't call it out without sounding defensive. You can't explain it without reinforcing the label you're trying to escape. So you keep moving forward, quieter than before, more careful than before, learning in real time how much of yourself you're allowed to show in a league that values harmony more than discomfort. Eventually, I realized that surviving in this league wasn't about changing who I was. It was about understanding where I was. There's a difference between being honest and being effective, and that distinction took time to learn. I stopped trying to win every moment with words and focused more on consistency in my actions. I learned that silence isn't always surrender, and restraint isn't tact weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. I began paying attention to timing, to context, to when a message would be heard instead of just said. That shift didn't make me feel smaller, it made me more grounded. I understood that confidence at this level doesn't come from proving yourself over and over again, but from trusting that your work will hold up even when the conversation moves on. The league didn't become easier, but it became clearer. And clarity brings a different kind of strength, one that doesn't rely on approval or validation, but on knowing exactly who you are, even when the environment around you keeps shifting. Looking back now, I understand that learning how the WNBA really works wasn't about losing my edge. It was about sharpening it in a different way. The league didn't break my belief in honesty. It forced me to mature it. I learned that being real doesn't always mean being loud, and strength doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like patience, sometimes it looks like discipline, and sometimes it looks like knowing when your presence speaks louder than your words ever could. That lesson didn't come easily and it didn't come quickly, but it made me more complete, not just as a player, but as a person. And if you're watching this and you feel like the system you're in doesn't work the way you were promised, understand this: you're not failing. You're learning. Talent and effort get you in the door, but awareness teaches you how to stay without losing yourself. And if this story resonates with you, stay here. Subscribe, because this channel isn't about pretending the game is simple. It's about understanding how it really works.